On this episode of ResiWeek, COVID-19 cancels tech summits and shaping your workplace culture. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 215, People First.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Middle Atlantic. What great systems are built on.
Welcome to ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv. And this week, I'm pleased to be joined by two of my longtime friends. First, we have Haggai Feiner. He is the CEO of Access Networks. How are you, sir?
I am very well. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Then we have Giles Sutton. He is the Senior Vice President of Industry Engagement for CEDIA. How are you?
I'm awesome, Matt. Good to be on the show. All things considered, we're doing well.
And that's our subtle lead-in right there, all things considered. All right.
I like to give you a segue.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I need it. Let's kick this. We're going to kick this off with a story from a couple of days ago, and it'll all tie in. The show's going to be exactly what you think it's going to be. CEDIA cancels tech summits that were planned for March and April, including Woodland Hills, California, Irvine, California, Dallas, Texas, Houston, Texas, as well as the Vancouver show in British Columbia, Canada. Giles, I'm going to start with you on this. Obviously, some of this came out of the potential for exposure at I believe the Fort Lauderdale location, which sent you and the rest of the CEDIA staff, as well as some manufacturers and integrators from the South Florida area, home to self-isolate for a couple of weeks. But obviously, with everything that's gone on since this article came out, these would have been bad events to show and have happen, and in some cases wouldn't even be legal to occur. So Giles, starting with you on this, knowing that, obviously when this was announced, we didn't know what we know today. How hard was it to come to this decision to postpone these events, knowing what you knew at the time, and how can you speak at all to when these things might get back on the calendar?
Well, I mean, it wasn't a particularly hard decision, I have to say. Our first concern is obviously the attendees at the event, the manufacturers and the integrators that go to the event. You're right in saying we had a couple of attendees at our Florida events that did test positive. So you're right, we went into a period of self-isolation, and we sent communications out to everyone who attended those events. So really, when looking at California at that time had already declared a state of emergency. Obviously, things have changed since then. There are much more wide sweeping restrictions on these types of events. So really, we felt that it would be impossible for us to proceed with these events. We saw other industry events also being cancelled. So we're actively looking now to reschedule those events for later in the year. Obviously, we're hoping that the situation will resolve itself as soon as possible. But yeah, I think we've seen this across the industry with events being rescheduled. The only one that actually kind of managed to escape that was the ProSource event that I attended. So yeah, which actually was extremely well attended, I have to say.
And incredibly short lines at the airport.
Absolutely, yeah.
Haggai, you and your company have participated in these events. What does it do to the channel? Is there something or anything that seeing these events get canceled that it limits exposure? I know, talking to a lot of integrators the last year or so, they've started to really look forward to these local events because they get to meet the manufacturers they want to. They get to, see their local peeps, if you will. They get to do a lot of things in those local events, and they're not always going to Expo every year. Does this affect the industry beyond just not having a show?
So, from my point of view, and granted, my point of view is the CEO's point of view. It's not the CSO. Bryce on our our team runs the client services team and the sales team under that or within it. My point of view is that these things have very little effect on us. We look forward to seeing everybody at the events, but ultimately everybody understands these are very special circumstances, and I haven't seen anything like this in my lifetime. The only time I can equate anything like close to this to is 91 Gulf War. I was 15, and we had Scud missiles falling on us. We had to stay home. We couldn't leave. We didn't know if it's a biological weapon or a standard warhead with explosives, and there was nothing on the shelves in Israel. So to having said that statement, this is unprecedented. And so, sure, we'd love to see everybody. We'd rather everybody stay safe. And I think the upside for us, for all of us, is that guess what? Communications are, even more heightened right now. Everybody understands the importance of well-functioning home on all of its levels, and why, for example, health at home is important. Your home automation system is important. Your network is important. Mm-hmm. And this is what we fall back to. I think this entire event actually reinforces the need for our industry to not only be doing the high end, but doing all the jobs. Any job we can put our hands on, we should be involved in. It's going to be easier to communicate that to the homeowner moving forward.
So let's kind of pull that thread for a minute, and the show's kind of going to go all over the place. We're not going to likely cover as many stories as normal. When you say that, this morning I was on site. I had to send a text to my client at like 7:30 in the morning because they're on the other side of town, and it takes time to organize things and get people there, saying, "Hey, do you still want us in your house?" You mentioned communication. Obviously, that's going to be a big part going forward. What are integrators? What's the best practice here? Is there a best practice, or is it going to be kind of a feel this thing out and see how this goes? Because selfishly, I've got a 5-month-old. I don't want to personally go into anybody's house that may have this, let alone if they want me or any of my people in their house. What's your take on that, Haggai?
Yeah, I personally know a couple of people that have been infected. It can happen to anyone, and obviously we don't want to expose ourselves to anything when we absolutely don't have to. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to have to use your best judgment here. It's not a simple thing to decipher.
I would say as well, there are going to be regional differences. That's not, we're seeing that at the moment with how this, just in the United States have different approaches to it. So I think it would be very difficult to have one standard sort of best practice that suits the entire industry, because of course we're also a global association with members across the world, and we're seeing that countries' responses are very different. So I think obviously what we're seeing is conversations definitely starting to develop on our community around this. So there is definitely a willingness to share how integrators are dealing with this, with maybe having technicians that are maybe unable to visit sites and have more time on their hands. But it's one of those things where I think we're all seeing how it's going to change day by day.
Yeah, because I know I was on our sister kind of more commercial show, AVWeek, on Friday, and we talked about the uptick in remote work, and not just remote work for people on our teams and people in our offices and our companies, but our clients who are now sometimes thrust into a ton of remote workers. Obviously, this is a good position to not sell, but to make the case for why we want to monitor networks, why we want remote access for everything else. Giles, is there enough of an opportunity here, or is the industry to a point where we can offer some of our employees a significant enough amount of remote work, or are we not there yet for the majority of integrators?
I think there's a number of challenges. I'd like to say yes, but I think we still have a number of challenges in that we are fundamentally a hardware-based industry. You know, I think you can argue that the future for our industry is not necessarily hardware-based, and I know there's been countless discussions on that. But I think ultimately, our members, integrators, are in the business of installing products in people's homes. You know, I 100%, all these homes should be monitored, and there should be an ability to maintain them remotely for sure. But I think we're definitely not at the point yet where we can go to a completely remote model for this industry. All our manufacturers are still making product that needs to be installed, you know, in the home. So it's not something that we can really get to just yet.
Hey, thanks for watching the first segment of this week's episode. To catch the entire show, please click the link below or visit avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.